To the Man of the Law podcast. My guest today is Matt Giancarlo. He is a black belt at and owner of Crimson Guard here in Chicago. He's in it's actually at 4640 West 103rd Street in Oak Lawn. So that's basically the southwest side of Chicago. And he is the owner of Crimson Guard BJJ. So we have, kind of a lot in common. And you were a former police officer. You were a Chicago police officer for many years. I'm also a Chicago police officer, so we've done the same job, we've worked the same streets, and we both know, kind of the importance of jujitsu. And looking at your Instagram page and kind of your bio, I just saw a lot of interesting stuff and thought I wanted to talk to you and get a little more of your background. And so, welcome to the show, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And just to get started, I always ask people, kind of how the journey started. I think you started with wrestling at Marist High School, or were you even wrestling before that?
Yeah, I started at Marist. I I got into wrestling on my own. It was my idea. My parents were actually very, very against it. They always saw
Really?
my brother as the athletic one and not me,
Yeah.
I was supposed to be the creative one of the family, but my gym teacher, I mean, I really wanted to wrestle. My gym teacher was the wrestling coach, Mark Gervais at the time, was there for years. So
Mhm.
first parent conference or teacher conference night, I asked him, I said, hey, wrestling season's coming up. My parents are against it. My brother wrestled for you. Convince them for me. And they came home, said, all right, you're on the team. You got our green light. We talked to Coach Gervais, you're good. So that's kind of, but I got into it not necessarily to like accomplish much in wrestling. I was an MMA fan at a very young age, kind of from
Right.
accidentally renting like the UFC 6 VHS when it got released. I thought it was pro wrestling because I saw Ken Shamrock on there, and I was
Hmm.
hooked as like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. So yeah, I was like, I love MMA. I was such a fight nerd, and
Hmm.
at that time in like 2003, that was the closest thing I had to MMA was high school wrestling. So that's how I jumped into that.
Yeah, definitely. That was still like, early days of UFC and not a ton of jujitsu gyms, but wrestling, has been, big throughout the country for years and years. And
Right. Right.
yeah. So when was the switch from wrestling to MMA? And did you do some jujitsu before you kind of started your MMA stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So 2006, when I started getting more comfortable driving, because I was still like a 16 or a 17-year-old at the time. At that time, there wasn't a lot of options, especially like really local for me. And again, I was a
Right.
new driver. So once I kind of got comfortable jumping on the expressway, I was either, I was thinking of the options. I know there was Force Jiu Jitsu at the time by Sean Burke, which is about 30 minutes away from me. And then another 30 minutes east into Indiana into Sherville, there's Team Corral. And I had a
Mhm.
friend who was a blue belt over there. So since I already knew someone over there, I figured I would check it out. So yeah, I wanted to do jujitsu a little bit longer than that, but I, I I didn't have much. I was still young, so I didn't have much driving experience. I just got my driver's license. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go on an expressway there and back every day. That's pretty dangerous for me. So once I kind of got
Mhm.
confident with that, I'm like, all right. So 3 days a week, I was driving out to Indiana as a high schooler just on my own and training. I was putting a lot into it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And people, kind of, get spoiled now with all the gyms that are out there and all the, the
Right.
high level coaches that are really kind of all
Right.
over Chicago. But, even 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. People had to drive for hours and hours just to, work with a black belt or a brown belt or somebody high level in MMA.
At that time, I remember Jeff Neal was in Naperville, so it was too far for me. Carlson Gracie was somewhere like downtown or up in the
Hmm.
city. And then where I went, Braulio Carell, he was still a brown belt at the time, and there was no black belts in Northwest Indiana at that time. So he
Yeah.
was the first one. I remember when he got it from Marcel Montero, it was a big deal because again, this was like 2006. He was the first, and now there's tons over there. But
Yeah.
at that time, it was there was no one. He was a brown belt, and that was it. And Miguel Torres was either a purple or brown belt at the time too. I don't remember. Um, but yeah, like I said, I chose Braulio just because a good friend of mine was there, who I still talk to this day. And
Hmm.
yeah, he kind of helped me get my foot in the door.
No, that's fantastic. And yeah, even when I started at Brazil 021, the two instructors there, Andre and Hanette, were the only two black belts. Everybody else
Yeah.
started there. Now we have a good amount of black belts that, have worked their way up, but they had no black belts under them, coming to the United States and started from scratch. So it was yeah, it's definitely evolved and jiu-jitsu's really taken off over the past 10 years. And I was kind of the same way. I was a big UFC fan and I watched like the first fight with when they were in the house with Forrest Griffin
Mhm.
and I forget the other guy's name, but he was from Chicago, I think, too.
Who
And
fought in the finale? Yeah, that was Stephen Bonner.
Stephen Bonner, yeah, Stephen Bonner and Forrest
Yep.
Griffin.
Yep.
And kind of after that, I was like, man, this is the coolest thing. So even though I,
Right.
don't really train MMA, but I, kind of do it, for fun with a net here and there. But it's yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. Yeah. So let's talk about like your first MMA fight. How was that? And where was that?
Oh man, a lot of adrenaline, but a lot of tough training. That's like I was going crazy with training just nonstop. That's how the ears started,
Yeah.
just from that one training camp alone. It was just, man, I was training at G2 at Gilbert Grappling at the time, and I just, that room back then, because my first fight was in 2009.
Mhm.
Um, Tons of UFC and WEC guys in there. Like that's where Clay Guida came from. On the Ultimate
Mhm.
Fighter 6, like shortly after that, we had John Colossi in the room who was on that show. He fought 3 times on that show, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah.
3 times. Um,
Savages, savages.
yeah. Tommy Lee, WEC champion, Chase Beebe was in the room. King
Mhm.
of the Cage champ, Clay French. I mean, there was just, it was nuts. I was like, I felt like a minnow against a bunch of sharks that were just destroying me. But I admired all these guys from watching them on TV and everything. So I just wanted to keep going and keep going. And then, yeah, I took my first fight in October of 2009, and I won in the second round with a rear naked choke. It was pretty nice. It was a big weight cut for me. I had to get all the way down to 135. I just kept watching the movie Vision Quest over and over to
Mhm.
kind of motivate me to get the weight off.
That's a big
And
drop. Yeah, that's a big drop. Yeah.
yeah, I was
Mhm.
155 the night of the fight. So
Whoa.
for a 135 fight, yeah, yeah,
Yikes.
and man, getting my hand raised for the first time, I was hooked. I'm like, I want to do this a lot. Like, this is pretty
Mhm.
cool. It was a bloody fight. I got busted open quite a bit. That guy, he didn't look like much, but man, he hit hard, and he cut me right under the eye. I still have a scar from it, in the opening exchange with a hook. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I got to take this guy down and put him away because
Yeah.
he was a hard puncher.
Yeah. Well, that's where your wrestling comes in, right? Your wrestling and
Yep.
jujitsu. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. So, and then, how old were you kind of like when you kind of wrapped up your MMA career? I think you had 7 or 8 fights, right?
I had 8. I was supposed to be done in 2014. I just kind of was burnt out mentally. Physically, I was fine, but it was
Yeah.
just like, it was a lot of the weight cutting. I was just cutting an obscure amount of weight.
Mhm.
And I was just like, you know what? I would rather just I kind of want to be training because I want to instead of because I have to. And
Have to,
once,
yeah.
like 2014, once I had my last fight, I was like, you know what? This is fun now. It's no longer a job. It's no
Mhm.
longer, oh, I don't want to be here. It actually started getting fun, and that's when it really started getting more interesting to me. I took one last fight in 2021. It was shortly after Ella French and Carlos Llanes were shot. So
Yeah.
I was working in the fourth district at the time on CPD, and people were doing golf outings for him to raise money and this and that. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
can't golf. I'm like, but I could fight. And
Yeah. You're like, I could
I
fight, right?
so I had the promoter of Ignite contact an opponent who was a sergeant at the time for a correctional facility, Northwest Indiana.
Mhm.
So said, hey, let's do a charity fight. So both of us agreed to donate all of our ticket money and everything that we made back over to Carlos's family. So that's what kind of motivated me to do that one final fight, which was kind of cool, getting back in there thinking I was done. And, it was for a really good cause. Uh, the ref worked with Carlos's uncle, I believe. So the ref actually
Mhm.
refereed in one of like a fight for Yana's t-shirt or something. So it was really cool. There was tons of police there, and a bunch of local businesses donated for me, and it was good. It was a really cool feeling.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get back in the cage and do a fight, I mean, what a better reason, to do it. So yeah, because yeah, I remember that night too. I wasn't working that night. It happened because I'm on day shift, and but
Yeah.
it happened just outside our district, on 63rd and Bell, and
So,
yeah. So but yeah, that's good. You could raise some money for the family and for a good cause, and that's great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it was, like I said, it was a pretty cool feeling, like it was like both in one, getting back into it for the first time in years, and then
Mhm.
also knowing like, hey, I'm doing something good out of this. It's not really for me. It's just so I can have an excuse for people to donate, and you know what I mean? So it was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of how I look at jujitsu too. There's so much positive things you can do with, jujitsu and MMA and give back to people. And, that's one of them. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I felt bad after the end of the fight because I popped the guy's knee out with a knee bar.
Oh, did
And here's
you?
me thinking, oh, we're doing something really nice and really good. And
Right.
I injure the guy. I'm like, oh, but
You're like,
it is what it
sorry,
is.
it's still a fight. Right. Exactly.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. That the fight mentality still kicks in and you still want to win. And right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about, I mean, you said you're working in the fourth district. For those who don't know, we're both, Chicago police officers. I'm still a, current active police officer and you left the police department to start your own thing. So let's, because the basic is, obviously you can handle yourself pretty well. You have, a good experience in that, but just from a police officer's perspective and, somebody who's fought MMA, black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, just the importance of, some fundamental Jiu Jitsu and some fighting skills, grappling skills for police officers. If you can kind of go into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact statistics off of my top of my head because I got a course approved through a LETSB, Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board, called Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for Law Enforcement.
Oh,
I have the ability to be brought into pretty much any police department that NEMERT uses, which is a suburban mobile training academy, and I have like a presentation that I show to like suburban departments on why jiu-jitsu is important. And there's some places like Marietta, Georgia is one where they did all these case studies, and
yeah, they
it
actually have
showed,
statistics behind it, right?
yes, numbers of people who are involved in use of force incidents or TRRs for us who do jujitsu compared to the ones who don't. And the ones who don't, their rates are higher. They're more likely to go hands on because they'll usually see somebody as more of a threat than somebody who's trained will. And that's always the experience that I've had too. It's like, and not to be cocky or arrogant. I mean, I'm not really even complimenting myself. I'm complimenting my 8-year-old students, but I would like tell people like, no, I'd be
Mhm.
more worried about one of my 8-year-old girls in the class than this guy. But somebody who doesn't really have that like
Mhm.
experience will get a little bit amped up more and they'll be a little bit more defensive and think, okay, my life might end because this guy is yelling.
Mhm.
Knowing, or I should say, not knowing that he really doesn't know what he's doing, even if he tried, you know. And then even like with these case studies, how many people were hospitalized compared to how many people weren't, whether it's the officer or the offender. When you have somebody skilled in jujitsu, you're obviously going to protect yourself more, but you have the ability to control them with positioning alone. Usually, not always. There's those outliers and so on and so forth. But most of the time, in my experience, anytime I had to go hands on with someone, which was minimal, but each time it'd be one takedown and I would secure a position, whether it be mount or knee on belly or so on and so forth. And they're pretty much done. Or I lock up their legs and leg laces or something non-painful for them. And you could subdue them pretty easily. It's like you have other, and I put together all these videos and everything of way too much of a use of force response by untrained officers who are,
Mhm.
ground and pounding the guy or having a borderline bare knuckle boxing match with someone, hurting their own hands, hurting the offender, looking bad on camera for their local states or district attorneys. And then you have somebody who's good at jujitsu where it's one little takedown, mount, cuff, no viral video from that because there's nothing to watch. The only two
Right.
viral videos that I would say that I ever use that are jujitsu related that I showed to police departments are Matt Serra in the restaurant when he subdues a guy just by mounting him,
Yeah, I
and
watched
Ryan
that too.
Hall, the
Yeah.
exact
Yeah.
same thing in the pizza one. And
Right.
that's what I use to show these departments is look what they were able to do causing no damage at all,
Right.
and subduing this guy from the most basic thing, a takedown and mount.
Yeah. And Matt Serra was just mounting him, like talking to other people, like, oh, come on, this
Right.
guy is like out of hand. And it was like, just a walk in the park for him. It's, super easy because it's what he
Exactly.
does for a living and what he does every day. But yeah, that it's, I could, I look at a lot of data. I do a lot of stuff and looking at it too. And, if you're untrained, the only thing you have or the only tools you have is your tool belt. And, most likely that's going to raise the level of use of force because, you have OC, baton, and your firearm. And if those are the only three things it's not going to be good. And, I've talked about kind of that spazzy white belt before. Everybody's trained with the spazzy white belt, but what that is somebody who's not used to grappling and not used to being in those positions. And when you're on the street, you're going to have a few responses, that fight, flight, or freeze, right? And that's a natural reaction. But when you train jujitsu and you're on the mats every day, every, 2 or 3 times a week grappling, you get more comfortable being in those positions, and it doesn't have to be this panic. So you do see that in a lot of police officer videos. They end up, raising the level of use of force or using, strikes that aren't needed. I've never really, if somebody has their hands underneath them and they're on the ground, you could strike them for 20 minutes and they might not give you their arm. So it's better just
Right.
to,
Right.
use a technique and get their arm out. So there's,
And
yeah.
there's that one big video that went here in Oklahoma, actually. Guy had a gun inside a fanny pack. But there was just so much negative news, press, everything, protests in Oakland over the guy throwing a bunch of strikes to his face. Oh, yes, he had a gun, everything. But I told the police chief himself, I was in his office, we had a meeting. I said, none of this would have happened at all. And I'm talking the protests, the just nonstop media and everything. None of it would have happened if he knew one or two basic moves that I teach
Mhm.
my kids every day.
Right.
Like there would be no viral video. No one would care if you put him in a power half or if he chicken winged him or and cuffed him.
Right.
I'm like, it's a couple extremely easy things that
Yeah.
they could have learned and used that they just
Mhm.
didn't know how. And I don't fault the officer. He just
Right.
didn't know what to do.
Right.
It's not
Exactly.
his fault.
Yeah. And that comes down to the big question of, like, I talked to a lot of officers and, they're like, well, the police department should train us. And yeah, I see, some point in that too, but it's like, you're still out in the street every day. You're still going to be held responsible, for your actions. And I think, you need to do it on your own. You can't wait around for your police department to train you. Some departments have it. Some departments are kind of catching up with it, and that's great. But if not, I think you do need to, sign up for some fundamental jujitsu. And yeah.
And especially Chicago. I could challenge any Chicago police officer and ask them, show me every single move that you've learned in the academy. No one would remember because they only did it one
Mm-mm.
time. And
Yeah.
I could show them I could show them the best moves, in my opinion, that would work for police and jujitsu. But if I show it once to them and then 5 years from now, I ask them, hey, what was that? Show me that thing. They wouldn't remember. And I would expect them to. And I probably wouldn't even remember exactly what I thought. There's so many times where I have to say, all right, what did like in my
Mhm.
classes? What did we go over Monday? I don't remember. Somebody refresh,
Right.
So the ones who do say, oh, the department should train us, even if they did the once a year, once every 2 years, once every 3 years, and you're doing it just once for that year, it's really not good enough. Like you're saying, you need to do it on your own time. You need
Yeah.
reps. You
Yeah.
you lose it if you don't use it.
Right. Absolutely. And, my big thing is consistent training, that it's with everything, whether it's fundamental jujitsu or my law enforcement. I have a law enforcement class on Friday nights, and it's all about consistency. I just got my black belt in like 2 weeks ago in August 6th. And, I'm not super athletic. I'm 48 years old, but what I did was consistently show up 3 to 4 days a week, take private lessons. So I was training like 5 days a week
Right.
consistently for
Right.
year after year after year. And that's just how you get better. That's how you learn, a skill like this. So like the in-service training and things like that, it's good if they have some, but like you said, it's not going to be um, something you could use on a daily basis. You need consistent training. And what I see really maybe for the future of kind of police departments, maybe working with jiu-jitsu academies like the one I'm at, like Crimson Guard, and the police academies maybe going to these jiu-jitsu academies and saying, hey, we want police to come in here, at least train up to a blue belt level and some kind of maybe
Right.
stipend or time for these officers to go. Because I don't know if these big police departments are really equipped to do all this training and, do it in-house. And I kind of, it might not ever happen, but it would be nice if, some of these big police departments reached out to, kind of the local jujitsu gyms and, made an incentive for officers to come in and train.
Yeah, and there's some suburban departments that are offering like let's just say $1,000 of training credit where they'll kind
Hmm.
of like tuition reimbursement, but for training, which
Yeah.
I think more should, the city does tuition reimbursement like some of these suburbs are doing for training. They should, like you're saying, they should do the same thing where they'll cover a certain amount. Let's say $1,000 a year is the number that I've had,
Hmm.
given to me where they help cover it. And
Yeah.
I think that would be very helpful. But like you were saying, like, the repetitions, the consistency, in order for anything to work, and it's anything important in life, you have to be consistent. You can't just do there's nothing that's worth knowing that you could learn in one day and then 5 years from
Hmm.
now you're gonna be perfect at it.
Right.
I'm my honeymoon is gonna be in Japan. Every day I'm studying Japanese. Trying to learn enough to get by when I'm out there so I'm not
Hmm.
lost. If I did one day of Duolingo, just one, and expected next August to go to Japan and that would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
not
the
going to
same
happen.
thing
Yeah.
with jujitsu too. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I think my Duolingo day streak right now is 107 days in a row, and I'm still barely getting it. And it's the same with jujitsu. Like anything worthwhile, you need to practice. You need to practice. You can't just do it 2 days a year and then, oh yeah, I'm good. It's not the case.
No, no, it really isn't. And yeah, it's definitely a consistent thing. But I've had some pretty good luck with, getting officers in. Usually it's, kind of the misconception of jujitsu and, they think they're going to get hurt or, something's going to happen. Usually they end up getting in much better shape and they have less chance of getting injured because they're in better shape from training all the time.
Right.
Maybe little stuff, they jam their finger or, their toe or something minor, but it's, usually they're in much better shape. They end up losing 10, 15 pounds. They feel better. Their mental health, starts getting better because they're training better. They might start eating a little healthier. So, all
Right.
just kind of
Right.
those benefits of, training jujitsu that kind of go along with, your jujitsu journey as you start out. So, but, the officers I've had in class, they made the connection kind of right away. Usually it's with the first class
Yeah.
either,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, this is, fantastic. This is what we do on the street, and I can see how it works. And they come back after that. So that's been good.
Good.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And you got a good amount of police officers trained by you too, right?
We do, yeah. Being realistic, I'd say half of them are here a lot, and I love seeing
Hmm.
half of them. I would have to ask what their names are if they came in right now.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't remember because we've had a lot that sign up and they probably tell their friends at Baracos when they're on their fifth beer, oh yeah, I do jujitsu.
Hmm.
I'm trying to get them back in. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like that's the thing. It's like you can't sign up and do one class and say, all right, I'm good. We were talking about consistency, but on the positive note, we have some that are getting really good, and they came
Hmm.
knowing nothing. They didn't have any backgrounds. That they came from basic. And they're starting to get good now, and those are the ones who I'd be extremely confident in any situation out there.
Yeah, yeah. And those ones that, really get into it and train consistently, and they don't even know how much, better they are from day one. And yeah, how much, these skills can help you on the street. And I was the same way. I started out, and it was like 2011, I was in corrections and I was like, man, I gotta do something to, kind of learn how to fight, defend myself, self-defense, and kind of fell in love with jujitsu along the way. And then I got certified in effective fitness combatives with Jay Wadsworth. I don't know if you know Jay and effective fitness combatives, but it's he's kind of taken all the best of jiu-jitsu, grappling, wrestling, and kind of created a law enforcement system. And
Yeah.
it's a really good system, kind of takes all the best aspects. But even with that,
Right.
if you're just starting out, it's something you need, I was lucky enough when I, first took the training, I was a brown belt. So I had, I already had the skills of jujitsu, and, working in those techniques was a lot easier for someone like me because, I've been training for a long time. But just basic fundamental jujitsu, consistently over time is going to, change you as a police officer. It's going to change how you look at force, and it's going to change how you use force also. Definitely.
And I don't expect everybody to obsess over the sport like I do. Like I've been a fight nerd forever. But
Yeah.
it's my number one hobby. And everybody says, oh, if you become police, you have to have hobbies. You have to, you got to do something that you could disconnect. And although
Mhm.
it's relative to policing, it still is different enough where it could be that hobby. It's good for mental health. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of clarity, and whether it's police stuff which never really bothered me, but anything in life that was stressing me out, once you're rolling with somebody, you forget about that. You have a guy who's
Mhm.
trying to choke you out or break your arm. You don't forget about what's bothering you while you're rolling, which is it's a nice escape. Which I also try to tell officers, it's if you don't have a hobby and all you find yourself doing is, going out with other officers and drinking and talk about how many guns you have, like that's really bad for your mental state. You can't do that
Mhm.
forever. You got to find something. And this is such a good outlet for whether it's police or anybody when it comes to mental health and clarity, and like just a good way to forget about things. Like jujitsu is so good for that.
Yeah. And you're kind of doing two things at once. One, you're getting a great workout, which is good for your mental health. And two, you're working on, tactics you can use on the street to,
Exactly.
help you use force better. And
Right.
I'm kind of that, jujitsu nerd too. Started the podcast and the Instagram, and then, I still train a ton and do private lessons and try and, train as much as I can. But you don't have to be like that. You could just go,
Right.
2 to 3 nights a week and, get it as your stress relief, and it really works. And I've seen the change in myself, and not only in a lot of other officers too that just tout the benefits of jujitsu. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And they say even non-police, they say it's jujitsu is their therapy, and
Mhm.
they wouldn't miss it for the world because they feel better every time they walk out. But usually the hardest part I think is the consistency. You kind of got to just say, I'm going Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those are my days, and just show up. And even I'm the same way. Even I'm teaching 3 classes a week, and sometimes on Monday night I'm like, oh, I had a long day. I barely got out of work on time with like a later rest or something. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to go tonight. And I go and I feel better after. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I went and glad I took a class. Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, that's me every morning when I go
Yeah.
to lift weights. I never want to go to LA Fitness. I'm like, oh God, I hate this place. And as much as I like working out, I hate it at the same time. But
Yeah.
once I'm done, I'm like, oh, thank God I did this. I'd be so mad if I actually missed this. And
Yeah.
it's like you're saying, it's same thing training here. It's like once you're done, you're so glad you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you got to kind of work through that mental part and just say, I'm getting in. This is what I do every morning, and just drive and go. Yeah. So
Right.
that makes a big difference. So let's talk about kind of the change from police officer to I'm going to start, my jujitsu place, because that had to be, a big step in your life to say, I'm going to leave what I'm doing here and try and, kind of do what I love and start it full time. That had to be a big endeavor.
Yeah, so when we got our retro checks a few years back from the FOP, everyone had 20 grand or whatever it
Hmm.
was. I'm thinking, all right, what do I do with this money? What do I do? And I hear some people are buying cars, some people are doing the opposite, they're investing it. I'm like, well, I think I'm gonna use it to buy mats. Like,
Yeah,
wall mats, zebra mats, everything. And I'm like, I'll cover the rest of the costs on my own, just for money I'm saving. But I'm like, here's a check for 20 grand. Pretty much the mats were always my biggest, like, man, that's really expensive. So that's why I couldn't open up the school.
sure.
So since I had that money, I'm like, it's now or never. I either do it or I don't.
That was your
And I opened it
sign,
up.
right?
Right.
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 Yes.
And so I'm like, all right, I think I could balance both at the same time, both CPD and the school. So I contacted a couple other people, explaining my 4 on 2 off on afternoons. And I was like, If I need some help covering classes for me when I'm not on my one of my RDOs. So I kind of signed everybody to a date to teach Monday through Thursday when I was at work. And I'm like, if I'm off, I'll be there. But I just need some help coverage.
Mhm.
So it was working for a while, but then like I didn't expect my school to grow as much as it. We have about 160, 170 members already in like two
That's
and a half
great.
years. I
That's
didn't
great.
think it was going to be like that. I was expecting 40, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it
And
started to
your
grow
kids
and
class is
grow and
very
grow.
big too.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a full-time job in itself. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
And once it started to kind of really blow up, I started thinking, well, there's a couple things. One, I don't really need CPD financially anymore. I don't know if I want to do it, just because like this doesn't feel like I have a job. I mean, really, like still it feels surreal. It feels like I'm training full time and I'm
Hmm.
having fun full time. It doesn't, even though there's the business end where I got, I mean, there's a lot of paperwork I got to do, but throwing that off to the side, like I'm like, this is the coolest place ever. How am I making money here?
Hmm.
Like it just feels like I made a wish and it happened. Like it's
Yeah.
just, so I was kind of on the fence of, what do I want to do? Do I want to do the school, or do I want to keep running it part time, or do I just want to be here? And I was kind of crunching numbers and doing all this. And, I even called someone at the FOP asking advice and this and that. And he was telling me, he was like, hey, you got your school. I think you should do it. So I was on the fence for a long time. I was getting a lot of encouragement to do the school, but I still had some worries. And then I go into the hospital on February 19th for I had staph and infected my bursa, and they had to remove it out of my elbow. So I
Mm.
was all right. I need surgery. I'm going to be out for a long time. But that night, I remember that day. I should say I remember that date, not because of the surgery. It was the day that my brother passed away, and
I'm
that was
sorry to hear.
kind of the final message to me was like, you know what? Life is really short. He was only 39,
Yeah.
um, just turned 39. And I was like, you know what? I'm 35 or going on 35 at the time. Life is very short. And my brother was the first one to tell me. He was a financial advisor. So he wasn't giving me emotional advice. He was giving me like professional advice, leave the department, take the school on full time.
Mm.
And that day when I was in the hospital, I was just kind of thinking, you know what? I think that's it. I think once my medical ends, I'm just not coming back.
Yeah.
I'm like, I, especially like where I was, where I didn't want any more stress at the time. I needed any type of happiness I could get.
Yeah.
And it was from the school, to try to just get me back on my feet after losing my brother. And that was kind of the final deciding factor. It was like, so you know what? And there was a couple things to that. It was like, what if something happens to me out on the streets? And both obviously never did, because I
Hmm.
left on it. But I'm like, what if my parents just got done burying their son, and then something happens to me 2 weeks later, and they got
Right.
another. I'm like, that was on my mind too. It's like I was trying to think about my family and their stress and everything, and
Hmm.
and all that kind of was like, what? That's it.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
So, and it put me in a better mood. I'll say that. Like knowing like, all right, that weight's off my shoulders. I think
Hmm.
that was like the final sign. And here I am at the school. And since I have it full time now, I could grow it a lot more. I get to
Right.
be here more. I have more time to bring other guest instructors and host seminars and all this stuff. And
Right.
yeah, it gave me an opportunity to really live my dream now.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And yeah, and to, do it the way you want to do it too. And, trying to balance a full-time, job as a police officer and then kind of, run the business on the side had to be, super difficult. But, and I think, people coming in and
Yeah.
you being successful, kind of was your sign too. It's like people are coming in the door, people are signing up. So obviously, it was working for you and continues to work for you. So that's fantastic.
Right. Yeah. And like, it was really hard doing
But
both
that's a
at the same
scary
time
leap
before
though.
that.
I'm sure it was a scary leap. I know.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, it definitely, like that's what took me so long to make the decision. I
Yeah.
just kept crunching numbers and all the what ifs and what ifs and what ifs.
Hmm.
And then, but yeah, I finally was like, you know what, I'm doing it. And yeah, I made the right decision.
No, that's fantastic. No, that's great. And yeah, let's talk about, some of the classes you have that I see you have a big kids program. You have no-gi, submission grappling, Muay Thai, and boxing. So you got a bunch of
Yeah,
coaches. And I also see you have a yoga class on Monday night. That's
we
interesting. I was
do.
kind of surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my students asked, one of my female students, Katie, asked if she could run a yoga program.
Yeah.
She's super bendy, flexible. She
Hmm.
competed once about a year ago and really used that to her
Yeah.
advantage. And it, like she was good at inverting, and I never even taught her how to invert, but she was just naturally able to do it from like extensive yoga. And I
Sure.
was all about it when she brought it up,
Yeah, I think a
as
lot
saying
more
like it's something
jujitsu
that I
people
could
are doing yoga too. It's a very good complement to jujitsu and grappling. Yeah.
there's surprisingly a lot of things in that realm that could help jujitsu. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to go as far as this, but the very basics is breakdancing. I learned it from
Hmm.
Gio and Richie Martinez. I got to train with them. Gio's coming out to visit in a couple of weeks. I'm bringing him
Hmm.
out here. Him and his brother were competitive breakdancers, and they have such good jujitsu that they
Yeah.
credit their guards and being able to move. So I learned some things from like Gio is like something called threading, and it's like it helps you with your triangles and it helps you with your leg mobility. Now, I'm not saying I'm going
Okay.
to go out and start breakdancing, but the warm ups, essentially, the
Yeah.
breakdancing warm up and stretches is what
Hmm.
I'm getting out of that.
Sure.
And like, and same thing with yoga. It's the ability to learn how to move your body, balance your weight, to stretch
Hmm.
certain ways that really helps with your guard, with your rubber guard. If you have that stuff, everything.
Hmm.
Um, it does help a lot. But yeah, other classes were mostly a gi school.
Okay.
But on Wednesdays we do have no gi. It's primarily a wrestling practice. We roll live no gi with submissions, but most of our techniques that I go over are wrestling, very heavy wrestling based on that Wednesday. And yeah, like I said, our kids program is big. Our competition team for kids is pretty legit. I don't throw a ton of kids out there on the mat to compete. I
Hmm.
take my like 5, 6 really good ones out to the tournaments, and they consistently medal. It's very rare for any of them to even get a silver. They usually get gold, or if they do gi and no gi, double golds, because like I'm selective with who competes. But man,
Sure.
those kids who do compete, they are legit, and I can't wait
Yeah.
to see what they're like. And that's them doing it part time. Like I don't want these 9, 10, 11 year olds now. They started when they were 7 or so. I don't want them getting burned out
Right.
and hating it by the time. So
Yeah.
I don't let them compete in summer.
Hmm.
I make them have a fun child summer. So even if they've asked, I said, no, enjoy your summer. Go to the
Right.
water
Exactly.
parks, play in the pool.
Hmm.
You can compete when it's fall, winter, spring. But like I said, I don't want them burnt out where they're competing too much. I only let them compete a couple times a year, so they still find it fun. But when they do, they're good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun watching the kids because we even have on Friday night before the law enforcement is it's a competition class. So the kids train in no-gi and it's just all the kids that do competing. And
Right.
it's crazy to
Right.
see these kids doing all these high level moves and
Right.
takedowns and the way they grapple and underhooks. I'm like, these kids are fantastic. So they really pick it up quick at that age. And it's really amazing to see, kids like kind of progress through jujitsu. And then we've, got some now who are joining the adult class that are kind of getting up into their teen years and they're really tough
Right.
kids.
Right.
Yeah. So because they've been doing
Exactly.
it their whole life. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm excited to see some of these kids when they're a bit older. And that's anyone like I said, I started when I was a teenager. I could only imagine if I started training as a 7 or an 8-year-old. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's so cool that now these kids do have the opportunity to do that. It wasn't like that years ago.
No, no, it wasn't. Yeah. And we have like 3 or 4 black belt instructors at Brazil 021 that teach the kids classes. And yeah, like 10 years ago
Yeah,
that wasn't available. It just wasn't available for kids. And that's always good to see. And yeah, absolutely. So just
right.
to kind of wrap up here, where do we find you? And if we want to, take a trial class and come take a class at Crimson Guard, how do we find you?
Yeah, so we're basically at 103rd and Cicero. We're right next to Jewel between Rockefellers and Clancy's here in Oak Lawn, right next to the city limits of Chicago, just a couple blocks away from Mount Greenwood, pretty much. So
Yeah.
anyone on the southwest side, it's a very easy place to access. We're open every day except Sundays and Fridays. Fridays we do have some open mats on alternating Fridays. And yeah, our website, crimsonguardbjj.com, has the updated schedule. Our Google listing on Google Maps and everything, updated hours. Everything's all up to date. My phone number is on there. Our Instagram and Facebook, Crimson Guard BJJ, or even just a quick Google search. All of our stuff will come up. I make sure that I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for talking to me today.